Okay. Good morning, students. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So in my last class, I think we had discussed something on the site selection for dams and
Yes, sir.
reservoirs, and also the problems associated with the dam sites, different dam sites. So today we shall continue our discussion on the site selection for the tunnels. What are tunnels and what are the important features that are required for the selection of sites in the tunnels? Okay. So as I already stated, these are very important aspects. Any one question may arise in all these three. It may be on dam sites, it may be on reservoirs, or it may be in the tunnels. Be very careful. Okay, make a very good, clear understanding of all these three. If you have got any questions, you can raise your hand, or else you can ask me orally itself. You unmute yourself and ask me orally. Okay, but these are very important concepts. Any one of the question will arise in the examination. So coming to the tunnel, what is a tunnel? So it is a horizontal passage which is open at both the ends at the ground surface. Okay, so it's a horizontal underground passage which is open at both the ends. Okay, if it is only one end opening, then it is called as a cave. Okay, if the opening is present in only one end, then it is called as a cave. If the opening is present on the both the ends, it is called as passage. Now, why tunnels are being constructed? So they are constructed to the cities through the mountain passes, which can be used to carry the railways, even the roads, canals, water supply, all these things. If you have moved from either Kerala to Bombay, all along the coastline, you can find these type of hundreds of the tunnels which are being built across. Okay, so that it facilitates the movement of the trains, which is called as a Konkan railways. Okay, so they are made through these openings of the tunnels itself, through the help of these tunnels itself. Okay, so it connects two cities between Bombay and Goa. If you move towards in the train, then you can know there are around 50 to 60 tunnels which can be seen. Okay, so that tunnels are the ones which are used to connect the two different places, connect the two places. Okay, even they are made on the roads also. Even if you move from Bombay to Goa or either from Goa to Bombay, then you can see these tunnels as roads also. Even for canals, even for the water supply, also these tunnels are being made. So, which carries a tunnel which carries water under pressure is called as a pressure tunnel, which is used in the production of hydroelectric power. So, if you have seen the Varahi project, if you have seen the Varahi project or you have heard the name of the Varahi project near Hosnagara, Chakra, that is a place where you have to go for around 1 kilometer in the tunnel itself before you reach the hydroelectric power station. Before you reach the hydroelectric power generation system or the station, you will walk across the tunnel itself for 1 kilometer, which carries water on the either sides, which is required for the power generation. So, why tunnels are becoming very important? See, tunnel is very important from all these aspects, and if the selection of site is not very proper, mind it, if the selection of our site is not very proper, then it will lead to the collapse of the tunnels itself. And tunnels cannot be built everywhere. You cannot build a tunnel in front of JNNC, or you cannot build the tunnel inside JNNC, because there is no such mountain or anything like that. Okay, if you construct a tunnel near the Ragi Gudda also, it is a waste, because people will never use the tunnel which is required for the movement. Okay, so highly precise places where the movement is absolutely necessary and there is no other places for the movement, you cannot go around the mountain passes, then only they go for construction of a tunnel. So whenever you select the site for the tunnel construction, these are the factors which should be looked upon. That is the topography of the area, what is the nature of the surface material, what is the geological structure, what is the water condition and the vegetation. So these are the 5 important points which have to be looked upon before for the selection for the tunnels. Tunnel in rocks. So tunneling, before they do in a rock structure, what they do is they always, the rock should be broken down, the rock should be opened up, so which requires blasting. and you cannot simply blast the surface whenever and however you want. Okay, so those should be done under prior conditions itself, prior proper conditions. Okay, so the blasting also cannot be done whenever and however it is being required to. It should be done in a similar ways at a particular time itself. If the rocks are not very structurally, if the rocks possess the very poor structures, surfaces, then supports are often placed under the tunnel. Otherwise, what happens is the tunnel usually requires the supports. The tunnel usually requires the support. So, what happens is if the support is not given in a very proper manner, then the collapse of the tunnel will usually take place. The collapse of the tunnel will usually take place. That's why what they do is they have to give certain perfect. They have to give certain perfect they have to give certain perfect the support to the tunnels. Otherwise, what happens is it creates a very big impact on the tunnels. So that's why what they say is the supports for the tunnel should be given at a very proper area. The supports to the tunnel should be given at a very proper areas, and properly the support should be given. Okay, so then sealing is also usually done to the surfaces.
Sir, PPT is not visible.
PPT is not visible.
Yes, sir.
Is now it is visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. If that is the case, you should have told me earlier itself, because sometimes it happens. Okay, sorry. Okay, now you know that sealing is also being done. Okay, sealing is also done, is employed to the rocks, because you know that the if sealing is not done, then the collapses might occur to the rocks. Okay, even during blasting, what happens is during blasting times the cracks may be generated in the rock's body. Okay, cracks will be generated in the rocks. So the sealing is usually done in it is a process of cementing the open cracks, so that the further deterioration of the rocks will not take place, and the collapses of the rocks are not usually taking place. Okay, so cementing is usually done in the form of sealing, so that the cracks that are being generated on the rocks are being reduced. Sealing is usually done to that, because of the further deterioration does not occur to the rocks. Okay, and if further deterioration take place, then there may be chances that the rocks may collapse. So that's why they usually seal the process. Okay, this is also being done during the process or time of the blasting itself. Okay, so now what are the main factors which influence the tunnel? So these are the very important factors which influence the tunnel. One is swelling of the rocks, inclined strata, folded strata, jointed rocks, faulted rocks, and the weathered rocks. So these are the very important geological factors which influence the tunnel. Let us look at all of them one by one. What is swelling of rocks? As you know, most of the times the shales, which are the naturally made up of the clay materials, okay, so they have got a phenomenon of getting swelling when they absorb moisture. When they absorb moisture from the atmosphere, they swell and they become plastic. Okay, when the moisture content is being removed, then it shrinks off. Okay, whenever it shrinks down, there is slight movement of the associated buildings which are being used as a basement. If shales are used as a basement, then there are fractures and the cracks that are being developed, because it absorbs the moisture and swells, and when the moisture is being removed, it sinks down. Okay, so that's why what they do is, if that is the case, when it is most of the rocks are made up of the shale material, then they have to use the immediate supports. Okay, that should be taken care. So that's why geological conditions plays a very important role in selection of the sites for the tunnels. Okay, if that is the case, then what they do is they give immediate support. Otherwise, what happens is further deterioration of the tunnel chances are there. Further deterioration of the tunnels, or the further breakage of the tunnels can also be possible if the support is not being given immediately. Sometimes what happens is the entire tunnel may collapse down because of the minute movements of the shales. Whenever there is shrinking and the swelling action taking place simultaneously, what happens is whenever the shale rocks absorb the moisture and swells, it becomes plastic like nature, so that the upper body below the foundation, it becomes plastic. The upper body will become fragile. The upper body which is being laid is becomes fragile, hence further deterioration chances are there. When expansion and the shrinking takes place, further deterioration takes place, because there will not be certain strength that is required to hold the pressure that is exerted by the rooftop. Okay, so that's why immediately they give the supports. Next is inclined strata. Okay, so along the strike of the strata and across the strike of the strata, what happens is along the strike and across the strike, if the tunnel is being built, so chances are there that the collapse of the overlying material may take place. Whenever the across the strike or the along the strike, what happens is whenever the rock types are supporting from the top, okay, the tunnel requires the supports from the top. Okay, so if it is done along the strike, what happens is they will act as a barriers to the tunnel, so that the further deterioration will not take place. Further deterioration will not take place. If it is done across the strike of the body, then what happens is usually there is chances that it will pass through different rock types. Okay, so there will be downward pressure from the roof. Okay, in an inclined body where current is given parallel to a straight direction, tendency that the rock will fall from the tunnel from the sides. Okay, so these are the chances when it is made along the strike and the across the strike body. Okay, so now folded strata. So this is very important when tunnels are built across the folded strata, that is across axis of the synclines and the axis of the anticlines. So now what happens is, if a tunnel is done through the synclinal valley, so this is a synclinal valley, you consider this as a syncline. Okay, so this is a valley. Okay, if what happens is, if tunnel is driven on the synclinal valley, okay, so it will contain some water. Okay, usually what happens is this will contain, this is a natural storage for the waters. So these are the places where the water is being stored very naturally. Okay, usually what happens is the water will get collected at the synclinal portions itself, at the basins like structures itself. Okay, so this becomes a natural reservoir for the water. Okay, whenever in the rainy season, what happens is, if the water falls on these tunnel structures, then all the water starts to accumulate within the tunnel itself. Within the tunnel itself, the water will start to accumulate, so that it becomes very difficult for the passage of the movement. It becomes very difficult for the passage or movement. So that's why what they say is, you have to avoid these structures also. Okay, you have to avoid these structures of the synclines also. If it is an axis of anticline, what happens is, when it contains the anticlines, sudden rock falls are very difficult, because it has got supports from both the sides. Sudden rock falls is very difficult, and whenever the water falls on the upper surface, it will move along across the anticlines. It will move away from the tunnel portion, which not lead the water into the tunnel surface. You understood? It will, if the water falls on the mountainous passes, if it is a anticline, then what happens is water has got a tendency to move away from the limbs. Okay, it will move away from the tunnel area, but it will not get collected within the tunnel. But in this case, what happens is, it will move directly into the tunnel itself, which creates havoc for the passage of the particles or the transport of the vehicles or anything like that. Then such structures are usually waste itself, because in rainy season no movement of the vehicles or anything like that can take place here. It becomes a very big failure. If this is the case, if it is a case of anticline, then you can assume some of the movement, because whenever the water falls on such surfaces, it will move away from the tunnel surface, thereby facilitating the free movement of the structures. Okay, so then jointed rocks. What are the jointed rocks? You know that joints are very helpful in excavating the rocks, because you can remove very easily the rock body, but it is very difficult in tunneling. For the extraction of the rocks, it is very easy, but in the case of tunneling, it is very difficult, because if joints are present, the rock will fall and the groundwater seepage will occur into the tunnel. This is very important. So groundwater seepage is a very common phenomenon. Okay, so if the faulting or the jointing of the rocks is being present, then what happens is, if the rocks contain numerous amount of fractures, then there are chances that the water will pass through or percolate through the fracture zones and will reach into the tunnel, which leads to the seepage of the water into the tunnel, groundwater seepage into the tunnel. So thereby it creates a havoc to the movement of the transport of the particles or vehicles also. That's why jointed rocks should also be avoided. So coming to the faulted rocks, you know that fault area are the very major source of troubles in the tunneling. If any faulting area is being present, then you know that it contains two parts. One is a hanging wall and another one is a footwall. Okay, in either of the cases, if a faulting occurs, then there are usually tunnel will break down and one part will move down, or it may go up corresponding to the other part. One may become hanging wall and another one will become a footwall. Then it becomes, the zones will become very crushed, and the crushed rocks are highly permeable and allow the groundwater into the tunnel. Okay, so once the faulting occurs in an area, then those zones becomes highly crushed zones. When the rocks are crushed, then what happens is more and more amount of fractures are being induced into the rock, jointing is being induced into the rock. The rocks contain numerous amounts of the fractures, through which the groundwater seepage will occur into the tunnel. So that's why faulted rocks should also be, or faulting area itself should be avoided when you are considering the sites for the tunnels. Coming to the weathered rocks. So weathered rocks, as you know, there are two important types of weathering. One is a physical weathering and another one is a chemical weathering. Even biological weathering is also being present. Physical weathering is physical disintegration or mechanical disintegration of the rocks. Okay, chemically means by the action of acids, and biological means by the action of the living organisms. During any cases, if a rock is highly weathered, then it becomes very difficult for the excavation process, because again the groundwater, which passes through the number of fractures and the faults which is being present, through openings, fractures which are available through the water movement, they rush into the tunnel and they cause flooding. Okay, so these are the very important aspects when we have to look for the tunneling process. Okay, factors which are which influence the tunneling. Okay, so if you have got any questions now, you can raise your hand, or else you can unmute yourself and you can ask the questions. You can raise your hand, and if you have got any questions, you can ask me. Don't leave the discussion, because your attendance are still not being recorded. Nobody has got any questions? So these are very important aspects. It may be dams, reservoirs, or tunnels. Site selection. Any one of the question will occur in the examination. That is for sure. We don't know which one will occur, but one for the examination is very 100% sure. If you have got no questions, we can continue discussion next class. Drop in your attendances now. We shall continue discussion next class. Thank you.